what can be a solid structure for storytelling that gets them into the rooms that they always want to be, like be it investors, clients, wherever?
I think a lot of people don't realize is that, especially at the early stages of the business, you are your story. From the Mahabharata to the Avengers, all of them follow these standard sort of story arc. And SaaS companies can use this well, right? You, the SaaS product, are actually the hero here, right? Like you could be Robert Downey Jr. and your team is a group of Avengers.
I feel a lot of founders really obsess over product pitch decks and growth metrics, but they always keep storytelling part as an afterthought.
What is it that make you do this every day when things are tough? When your kids have board exams, but you have to run your business, or you're running out of money. So at the worst times, what is it that makes you do this? And I think that's a great way to kind of think about your purpose here.
Hi, and welcome to Pivot Point with Usha. What if storytelling could change the world? And our next guest has built two ventures exactly on that belief. She's the co founder of Comms Ninja, which has delivered 25,000 hours of communications supported to with 65 purpose driven organizations across Asia. Please welcome Aditi Seshadri.
Thank you so much, Usha, for having me. Congratulations on this wonderful podcast. I'm so glad to be a part of this.
Great. I'm also like very excited to talk to you and whatever events I have seen you, you're such powerful orator that I really wanted to have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
Great. So one question that every founder seems to be struggling with is how to make their story powerful to get to reach to the investors. What do you have to share to them?
So I'm a founder myself. So and but even before that, I've worked a lot with a lot of founders. So I have huge sympathy for founders. I think they have a lot of things that they have to figure out. They have to first figure out what is the product, how do I reach my customer, and then there's of course the sort of the whole investor, especially for people who are trying to fundraise. How do I reach my investor? What is it that they're going to be interested in? I think the question is, it's not about being sort of powerful. People are not looking for, it's not about like how powerful is your story, but really how true or real is it, right? And I think that's where the struggle happens a lot of times. Not because people are trying to be fake or lie or anything like that. It's just that poor founders, like they don't have enough time to kind of think about all of these things. So maybe they've not spent the time. The problem is that they're not thinking about their storytelling enough, and I think that's where the problem really starts.
Yeah, absolutely. And to know more about your journey of, you being a founder and now you do community building and you're supporting a lot of female entrepreneurs. So what's your story like?
So I have I have over a 20-year career that's kind of mixed different themes. Storytelling has always been a part of it. I started out as a journalist. That'll kind of tell you how old I am because this was when newspapers were still very important and people used to read newspapers. Um, and I think one of the things that it taught me working in a newspaper was that you couldn't afford to make mistakes because if you made a mistake, if something would go to print and there was no way to change it, right? You can't go back and edit like you can edit a WhatsApp message now. So I think what that really taught me was the importance of like really knowing, researching something, making sure you've kind of put all of the pieces together and then going out to publish it, right? So I spent several years in journalism, and that's where I think a lot of my basics, my foundation became quite strong in that. I did go to a wonderful media school before that, where I learned called Sophia Polytechnic, where I learned from some of the best journalists and writers at that time. However, I always say this: I wasn't a very good journalist, so I decided at some point to kind of switch careers, and I moved into more of like comms and marketing and content because I felt like that was better suited to the kind of work that I like to do. So I spent
Yeah.
several years in nonprofits, in social enterprises, working in heading comms and marketing for organizations. And as they say, at some point, being around so many of these organizations and founders, I got bitten by the entrepreneurial bug myself. I said I'll make my life a little bit more complicated, and I started my venture, Unlock Impact. We do two things in Unlock Impact. One is that we actually deliver content marketing services to a whole bunch of organizations and founders. And I run a community for women entrepreneurs called the Nushu Network. So this, storytelling and founders and entrepreneurship has kind of, I feel like, the path at some point led to this. So this is now my sweet spot, which is why I love having these conversations with people.
Absolutely. And that journey, honestly, um, when we see that, it really motivates a lot of women to start building and to start doing what they are good at and start showing up. So thank you so much for that. So I feel a lot of founders really obsess over product, pitch decks, and growth metrics, but they always keep the storytelling part as an afterthought. So, what do you feel they should be doing while preparing for fundraise?
So, as I mentioned at the start, I think, yes, you're absolutely right. Founders are too busy with too many other things, right? And I think the issue is that maybe they're not thinking about storytelling enough. But it becomes an afterthought, right? Like it's like, okay, first let me figure out what my product is. First let me do this, let me do that, and then when I have time, I go and put a post on LinkedIn. What I think a lot of people don't realize is that, especially at the early stages of the business, you are your story. For founders, when you don't have a big team in place, or you're just starting to build the brand, maybe you have like one or two people at the early stage of that business and brand. People are actually joining because they're excited by you, the individual, the founder. They really like what you're doing. Maybe your passion is coming across. Like the first couple of hires for any organization is only because maybe they like the mission, but they also somehow are trusting the founder. So I think that's the way to think about it. That it is actually what is good for you. It's not a vanity project. It's actually good for business, and it's good for the brand. And what that means is to really, at those very early stages, to you are the story. So who are you? What are your values? What are your motivations? When the brand grows enough, and there's of course more people, more things to talk about, then it becomes more. We've seen this with a lot of brands where the shift
Yeah,
happens from a founder-driven storytelling to a brand-driven storytelling. But I think
mm,
at the early stages, definitely, whoever it is, and definitely investors who are coming in at a certain stage they're actually betting on the individual. They're betting on their past track record. They're betting on like what is their passion and mission for this, because when you're building something, it's very hard. So really, it's not the same thing as a job, where someone else is kind of making all the decisions, and you have to kind of show up every single day.
yeah,
So how do people understand that you are in this, right? And I think that's what a lot of times investors want to see, that you are really, you are the one driving this. What do you stand for? How are you going to show up? And things like that. And maybe that's something that people don't think about often when they're so sort of caught up with building their brand.
absolutely. And so when you said, about founders, how they can, of course, like have storytelling as one of the core parts, where do you see the real problem is like with a lot of founders, and you keep talking to a lot of them. So where do you see is the real problem? Like, do they understand how important it is, or maybe they are not thinking about it more?
I think people understand it. I think they are intimidated or they don't have the time. Everybody, especially today, we're in a very hyper sort of communicative zone, right? Like everything is digital, everyone wants to share online. Your feed is packed. So people do understand it. Um, you know, Entrepreneurs, founders, they are not people who start, like, they don't pursue something because they want, most of them don't pursue something because they want to get famous, or they're good at like public speaking, or they're like, I know how to sell, so I'll start something. They actually start something because they're really passionate about an idea and they want to solve a problem, right? So by nature, that means that they are not, many of them are quite introverted. They are just very excited about what they're building. They're quite introverted. They've not had training on how to fix your light, how to like what should your video look like, what should your frame look like. I learned all this in media school, right? but most founders don't, and all of that can prove to be quite intimidating. I think, unfortunately, also today, when people think of storytelling, what they're thinking is that I can't do reels on Instagram. It's not for me. Uh, but what I tell everybody is that there are different ways to tell stories. If you are not comfortable with video, if your audience is not, doesn't need, if your audience is not very young and is not like looking into reels and all of that, there are other ways to do your storytelling, right? And a lot of people do that. So it's like, you join, like, you go to conferences, you give talks. Some people are just really good at like one-on-one meetings or like small networking groups. All of that is storytelling as well. And I think people just need to make this adjustment key. What is it? What am I good at? And matching that with, what does my audience need? And I think most people are okay. I think that's where people get very caught up, because in today's world, I think storytelling has become digital, and it
Yeah,
automatically means that I have to do like Instagram reels, right? Which is not for
yeah.
everybody.
Absolutely. So, I talk to a lot of founders, and a lot of them are like, Usha, we are not coming on a video, and we can do audio for sure, but the video we are not very comfortable with. So, I think this is one of the hesitations that they really have. Like, they have not come on the camera and they do not want to make the effort of,
Yeah. Because like I said, there is some training involved, right? Like, it's like just even today's conversation. I have a frame, like I know the light is good from here. I went and did my makeup and all of those kind of things, but you have to put that effort into it. But yes, most people are not comfortable with that, and mainly I think it's because they've not really been trained or taught how to do it. But it's very easily fixable, right? Like, there are people who actually do this training, and I think it's a small pain to take for a much bigger reward. And that's something I think worth investing in for founders as well.
got it. And so for startup founders, what can be a solid structure for storytelling that gets them into the rooms that they always want to be, like be it investors, clients, wherever.
Yeah, I'm going to say something that I think actually most social media or kind of, it's a may not like it's not a popular sort of idea, because in today's, like I said, hyper sort of digital world, the thinking is that you really have to keep thinking out of the box. You have to be creative. Creative is like, it's so broad. What does creative mean? And also, like, there's of course this whole thing of sort of like virality, right? But like I said, I come from a sort of a bit more tradition of just kind of breaking it down and following simplicity in these things. I really believe that there are tried and tested formulas. There is a reason certain kinds of stories work, and when you are a founder and you have a million other things to think about, I would say don't spend time kind of thinking like how what should I do out of the box, but actually how can I do things that have worked well? How can I keep doing it? And I'll explain that a little bit. Like, there are what we call story arcs, right? Good versus evil, David and Goliath, stories of redemption. Someone did something, they were going down the wrong track, but then they fixed it, and there's a story of redemption. Brotherhood, sisterhood, from the Mahabharata to the Avengers, all of them follow these standard sort of story arcs. And I believe that that works in all contexts, even for founders and startups. David and Goliath, for example, works for a lot of startup ideas, right? If you're not familiar with the story of David and Goliath, it's basically Goliath was this giant, who used to sort of like be like the dada of this area, and he went into competition with like this very small boy called David, and people never believed that David would win, but actually David won because he used a mix of um, what did David have to his strength? He was small, he was agile, he was able to think a little, he was able to adapt very quickly. Goliath was this very large man who was not able to move quickly. And because of that, David was able to overcome Goliath, right? So this story we've seen a lot in like the startup context. For example, I mean, if you take the case of Airbnb, Airbnb was actually originally a David, right? Today, Airbnb has become a very large brand. global brand, but they were actually originally the David in this because they broke the mold, and they took on the Goliath, which was like traditional hotel and hospitality business. People didn't think that this was possible, but Airbnb was actually able to kind of take that on and disrupt that because they were this small brand that was able to move very quickly, that was able to think very be adaptive, change and things like that. So it's a story that works a lot for startup and founders because of this kind of idea, right? There are a lot of startups who come in because they're trying to disrupt a big traditional Goliath, and this is a story people love. So could you adapt that to your startup brand? Say talk about being like this small person, small guy who's able to come in and you really want to change something. People have been doing things in the traditional way. Um, Another example, if I'd like to share is Avengers. Again, I think is a. I use the example of Avengers because it's literally the same story every single time. Every single Avengers movie has a
Yeah.
hero or a group of heroes.
Yeah.
They have to take on a monster. They come together to take on this monster, and all's well that ends well, right? Like it's a happy ending. Every single story is the same, but we go back again and again and again to watch this Avengers movie, which makes my point that story arcs. It doesn't matter. You've heard the same story like a million times, but like you'll always go back and watch it. In fact, there is comfort when you know how the story is going to end. So
True.
a way to apply it, for example, in like a more sort of business context is that a lot of times, SaaS companies can use this well, right? The SaaS
Mhm.
product is the hero. So you come in because you're trying to tackle this big problem. It could be like this huge data, that people say, say you're pitching to a client and your client is like, trying to manage like this huge data that they're not able to get a handle on. You, the SaaS product, are actually the hero here, right? Like you could be Robert Downey Jr. and your team is a group of Avengers, and what you're offering is actually a solution to, make that data sleek to kind of for the company so that they can reuse it. Everyone is happy at the end. So I really do think, just to give you a couple of examples, I think
Yeah.
what when something works, stick with it, don't mess with it, and especially in the context that you have a lot of other things to do. So this is a great way to sort of apply classic formula and use it for your storytelling as well.
That was really eye-opening. I would say, like we see there are so many content online for storytelling, but honestly, you have boiled it down to very a layman's term where anyone would be able to understand. And giving such examples of Avengers where people have watched and people can see, okay, this is the storytelling. It has been there in front of us all this time, and we have been watching it. So that thank you so much for putting those insights in a thing that everyone can understand. And so one question is if for B2B founders and for let's say D2C or anyone, so the storytelling structure works for all of them, or is it like any particular structure works for this industry and this one needs to follow another structure?
Um, very broad. It could work for a lot, but I do actually I have seen some patterns in this. A lot of tech companies or people who are building products right from whether it's Apple to like whoever, if you are launching like a tech product, what people like to see is that you're constantly sort of working on something to make it better, right? And you'll see this actually in a lot of movies and stories as well. This is what we call like it's like there's a journey. So often with Apple as well, like you saw this example, like they always sort of talked about their journey, where they started out, what happened, where is the product today, and you'll often see these stories in like videos about them, or in case studies about them, like where did they start out? Because what people like to see when it comes to tech is that there is a constant quest to become better, because that's what tech is about, right? Like tech is always changing, so people like to see that.
Yeah.
Microsoft, all of these guys have adapted that. I think that's one common sort of trend that works with certain types of companies. What I often tell people is if you're generally working in sort of more climate solutions, energy, all of those kind of things, what we call like the Avengers kind of storyline works, right? Where it's there's a monster, and the monster in this case is that actually that we're seeing climate change, or we're
Yeah.
seeing like a big sort of changes happen in the world, like and there are these like very passion driven people who are trying to solve it. So I would say broadly, like these are some trends, storytelling trends that work. Maybe one more example is when there are in the health industry, there is a very clear stark story arc that works, which is that basically you can't it's what we call tragedy, in the sense that if you look at like public service messages around like getting people to quit tobacco or smoking, in that case there's never an all's well that ends well, right? Like it actually, because they really need to drive the point home that if you don't quit smoking or if you don't quit tobacco, it can actually end very badly. So you'll see some, cancer, AIDS, tobacco, some certain sort of industries where people are dealing with very hard health problems, that there will be a very clear thing that if you don't do this, this will happen. There is no redemption. There is no, happy ending at the end of it, which has to,
Yeah.
and which is necessary because you need to get that message across. So maybe broadly, like these are some kind of trends that would work and some themes that work.
Understood. And just taking another example, if someone is building, let's take an example of renewable energy, or we can take any climate tech startup also. If they have particular idea, we can take an example, and then sort of try to put the structure onto how it actually works, so that founder can put their stories and try to make it their own.
So you're saying you'd like to take up a brand and put it into this formula? Is that what you're saying?
Not brand. We can take any example, like anything that you have worked recently. For example, XYZ, they were doing this, and that's how the storytelling structure applies to them.
Okay. So maybe I take the tech thing again. So I mean, we have some, like I said, during through our comms ninja, which is our vertical for storytelling and comms. We do work with clients on a regular basis.
Yeah.
We have a client called Dhwani, which is in the tech for good space. So they actually they work largely in the social sector, and they work with like large nonprofits and donors who have a really difficult time managing their data, right? Because these are also, I mean, these are not very tech savvy organizations, because NGOs, foundations generally don't tend to be, but they do have like databases of donors and their information and everything that needs to be managed, because you have to kind of because also there's money involved, so you have to track
Yeah.
where the money is coming from. This is a very it's kind of like, imagine like a Zoho, what Zoho does for like larger B2B organizations, but this is
Hmm.
specifically for the nonprofit sector, which has comes with its own set of constraints, right? So Dhwani,
Hmm.
for example, it's in this tech for social good space, but I think they're a good example of what I was referring to as like a B2B SaaS solution that is overcoming the monster for the nonprofit, right? Here in this case, for the nonprofit, the difficult thing is that they have this donor database, they have this data, they have limited budgets, they don't have people who are trained in this, so they are not able to manage it. Dhwani comes in. That's the problem they're trying to solve. Dhwani comes in as this, um, Avenger, like as a superhero for them, where they are able to actually come in, solve this problem, and then at the end of it, all's well that ends well, right? So I think maybe that's a good example. So if you look at the Avenger storyline, I mean, of course, it's not like it's in this case, like, if, for the NGO, the villain is the fact that they are not able to handle this data, right? So,
Yeah.
but Dhwani, for example, for them is that superhero who is able to come in, take down the villain for them, and then everybody is happy at the end. So maybe just to give you like a small example of how, and what Dhwani does in its storytelling is that they, if you look at their social media, or if you look at like case studies they put out, they actually often hype up this part of it. The fact that they are able to organize and solve data problems for NGOs, they make this very much a part of their storytelling. And
Hmm.
the one other thing that they do is that they also highlight like their employees, like the team, meet the team members who are part of the organization, and they, for example, could be the Avengers, right? Like there's a whole bunch of people who are able to come together to solve this problem for you.
Yeah.
Maybe that makes a bit of sense.
No, absolutely. One thing that also comes to my mind, and I honestly faced this myself while building a tech company. It was really impossible to. So when you are doing, let's say, five or six things, you are reiterating or pivoting. So what to pick from these five things that you're doing into your storytelling to make it most effective?
So I think what happens often is that founders are very passionate people, so they get very excited about what they're building. So I think the challenge that happens is that founders tend to talk more about what am I building, what is it that I'm doing, versus what does my customer want or like. So I would really recommend to think it's the most obvious thing. People say it for businesses. Know your customer, think about your customer work, think about your customer. That works for storytelling as well. So who is your, whether it's your end user or a paying customer, what are their likes, dislikes, what are their pains? If you work back from that, everything else I believe flows into place. So don't get too caught up on like what is it that I know and what is it that I'm building. Because at the end of the day, whether it's investors, whether it's even team hires, and of course whether it's sales, people, paying customers or end users are what matters to people, right? So if you have to choose one thing, I would say choose that.
Okay. And talking about the mistakes, what are the three top mistakes that you see founders doing right now with whenever you see them pitching and trying to tell their part of story?
Um, so I mean I don't want to sort of generalize saying these are the top things, but like I said, I think one of the things definitely is this, that people talk first about what they are doing and what they are building versus actually listening, putting your ear on the ground and listening to your customers, right? So I think that's a common. So, like I said, listening to customers, users, that's one thing I think just, and I think this is not just in terms of like, and it's good for business as well. So actually putting your ear on the ground and listening to your customer, I think more than like that's a mistake people make where they don't do that enough. And this can influence how you tell your story as well, right? Because once you realize what it is that your customer is interested in, for example, um, that you can actually adapt your storytelling for that. I think the other problem that founders face is that it's not that, see, everybody knows now that they need to do this. The biggest issue is a stop start, right? Like people start and then they stop,
Yeah.
because again, life gets in the way, work gets in the way. So founders start doing something, they start posting on LinkedIn, maybe they'll launch a podcast, but then they kind of fade off after a while. I think
Yeah.
that is the biggest issue, because consistency, people have, unfortunately, attention spans, as we all know, have become short, and people have a lot being fed to them, right? So if you're
Yeah.
not showing up on their in their consciousness on a regular basis, that becomes a problem. So consistency, both in terms of like the story you're telling, but also regularly sort of putting yourself out there, and thinking about like communicating with your audience. I think that's the second thing. Um, this is a personal thing that I feel that what happens a lot of times is when you're, depending on which stage of your business you're at, first
Mhm.
people of course are thinking product, and they're thinking sales, maybe they're thinking investors. Content marketing is like, okay, when we have time and budget, we'll go to that. I think that has changed. There was a time when that was possible, when very organically kind of word of mouth kind of growth was possible. I think that has changed. So thinking of it as a nice to have and not a must have, or what people call a vitamin and not a painkiller, I think that definitely needs to change. So from day one, also think about how you're going to tell, and it doesn't mean that you have to spend a lot of money or anything like that. It's just that you need to be thinking about it. Whether you do
Yeah.
it you plan to do it later, but it needs to be when you're making a business plan and you're working on your BMC, the marketing and content needs to be a part of it as well.
Understood. And so you said, as we know, all these platforms right now, the attention span has reduced to like 3 seconds. You have like there has to be a hook in 3 seconds, otherwise people are scrolling away. So in such times, a founder who is not very confident coming onto the camp, what can be a way for them to still build this storytelling online?
See again, how to if you Google, you know, you'll find like a million tips and tricks on what to do, and all of those kind of things, which are the right channels. So I feel like it's less about. So one is that I think the hard truth is that you are going to have to get comfortable with telling your story. There is no way around it. Because like I said, you are the story at the start, right? So
Yeah,
there is no way around it. Having said that, there have been founders who are, there are entire brands that have grown where you don't really know so much about the founders, right? And even in the recent past, like there are, yes, founders, but they're not as out there as others,
yeah,
even in the case of like brands like even Swiggy and Ola and all of that. Yes, you know about the founders, but they are not in your face. They're not out there. So it's possible to
yeah.
be really solid and kind of build like a very successful brand, and it doesn't have to be. I'm really just talking about earlier stages of that. But the thing is that you will have to tell your story, even and that may just be more in like rooms that are more suitable for you, right? So I would say go back to things that you are comfortable with. If you're not comfortable on video, write a blog. If you're not comfortable in large groups, do like small networking meetings. So I think just finding the sweet spot between what is where your audience is and what you can do. um, I think that's you do that, and that's usually more than enough.
Understood. So again, I see a lot of really good stories which are purpose driven. But a lot of founders, they might be purpose driven, but they do not know how to put it forward or to even figure out that purpose, right? Um, so what do you suggest to them? How they can find the purpose driven story?
So I actually think interestingly that founders are very purpose driven, right? I mean, that's why something motivated you enough to start something of your own and build it. If you were not purpose driven, if you were not motivated, you would have been okay with, working in a job or doing something else. So I think, and especially because the founder life is really hard. So you actually we need to be very driven and very purpose driven by an idea or a solution. And the key is to find that, right? So my go-to is when things are good, it's fine. When there's money in the bank, when the team is, stable, when things are growing, there's a lot of things you could say about purpose. I would
Yeah,
say, what is it that makes you do this every day when things are tough? So, when your kids have board exams and you have to also oversee your kids' board exams, but you have to run your business, or you have a sick parent in the house, or you are sick. Some days, like you wake up sick and you have to still do this, or you're running out of money. So at the worst times, what is it that makes you do this? And I think that's a great way to kind of think about your purpose here. Like I started a I started my business because I really wanted to have an impact, and I wanted to work, of course, bringing the work that I love doing, but I did want to have an impact on organizations and brands that were beyond me, right? So that's the mission. That is the larger thing that I tell people. But, when things got tough, when we were having cash flow issues, we had people leave us. Um, I've had like some moments where I'm just like, why am I doing this? Should I, go out and look for a job? Is that better? But I realized one which I had not thought of as purpose, but I realized one of the big reasons I do what I do is also I get to work with people I like, and that is very important to me because I have done the career track, and I've done the jobs and things like that, and I realized that was a big difference. That I, for several years I worked with my sister. for several years, for many years now, I've actually been working with, a friend and a co-founder, and that is what kind of gets you. And my team, it's been, we've, very thoughtfully put together this team. The fact that when things are really hard for me, I can rely on all of this, and uh, I get to work every day with people I really like and trust. I think that I realized was a purpose I had not thought of, but that made me think that okay, this is also why I run a business independently, so that we could actually create a space where we could all do this, right? So I think that's
Yeah.
that's been my experience, and that's how I look at it.
Absolutely. I mean, now when you say it, I see that there might be one purpose on why you started, but on the way while you are building, there can be more purposes while you are still building it or you are doing this. So that makes a lot of sense. So a lot of times with telling our stories also sounds a bit preachy. Like so, for example, when I was telling my story, right? It felt like I am just talking a lot of good things about me. I have done that, but it just sounds like now I'm like being preachy about what I have done, what I have achieved, why I'm doing this and that. So do you also like feel people feel that when they are starting and how to overcome that?
I unfortunately I do feel like there is too much gyan out there. Um, there it has become a bit like if you're a startup founder, you have to share your founder story, but the founder story I find has I feel often is too much about like I have gyan, I have it's a very standard format, right? Like five things I learned or five tips to share. I think the issue is that, and that is what sounds preachy, and sometimes inauthentic or fake. Um, I think what we need more of is more introspection and reflection. Why is why is the world facing this issue? Why am I solving this problem? How can I make it better? I think as a founder story, if you are if you talk about a purpose that way, I think people always relate to that. What feels icky and what feels cringy or whatever often is that people are like there's a lot of posturing going on, right? Because people want to show that things are okay, but the reality is that it's a very up and down kind of life cycle. And I think that's what actually sounds like washing up, kind of um, fake, honestly. And I think that's the issue. Um, Again, I would say going back to what motivates you, because founders are very motivated people. So I think just going back to some of those things, what motivates you, what is it, why do you do what you do, because what is the problem you're trying to solve. I think these are all classic story arcs
Yeah.
that work.
Absolutely. So, I also see there are a lot of, let's say, this product or service already exists in the market. As you said, tech, like taking an example of any tech product, let's say it already exists in the market and a lot of players are doing it. And there's a new founder who's entering into the market. How can this person now, because the storytelling might be a bit similar on the problems that he saw and he's trying to solve, how to make your storytelling, your story stand out of the crowd that's already existing in the market?
So I mean, see, differentiation I think is a thing that is always yeah, most solutions have been developed, right? Like there are very few people who are coming with like absolutely new solutions that is like a market disruption and all of that. So I think like just get on board with that and accept that every, and I'm saying this again, every founder really believes like nobody has done this before, and I cannot tell you how many times I've heard this, because when we do like a diagnostic on the brand and things like that, like when I ask people like who are your competitors, or tell me examples of other people are doing similar things, and if the founder or the organization says no one is doing this, that's a red flag. It's just simply not possible. There are very few, literally very few solutions that are there, and that happens like once in a generation, and it's a decade defying kind of thing. So first, I think get a reality check on where you're operating, what is the solution that you're doing. So I think just think about that. again, I think the thing that I would come back to is that people think it is about, yes, you do need to, you need to have like a baseline of sort of, um, you know, like a clean visual, for example, right? Like you have a clean visual, you want, make sure sound and video and audio are okay, like all of those basics. But it is really not about making that trending reel. It is actually about having very strong, thoughtful, sensible, mission aligned content. Um, I want to share an example here, and this is not a famous person in the traditional sort of business sense, but this is someone I know, but she's also so her name is Geeta Arjun, Dr. Geeta Arjun. She was actually the top gynecologist, and she ran a hospital and a maternity hospital for a long time in Chennai. So she was basically a doctor for like 50 years of her life, and she's retired now. She came onto Instagram, so she's in her 70s. She came onto Instagram like a few weeks ago, and all she does is she just records videos of herself speaking. It's just she sits in a garden, there's like trees and flowers at the back, and she just shares nuggets about her experience as a doctor, her experience in life, being a senior citizen, her experiences about marriage. I cannot tell you the kind of engagement she gets. Within days, she came onto Instagram. Within days, she was at like 20,000 followers. She gets lakhs of engagement on her content. There is nothing trendy about it. It's
Yeah.
not, she doesn't have, like, she's not dancing, she's not making reels, dancing reels, she's not following a trend. She's just talking very, she had a brand earlier. She had, like, in the sense that people knew her as this very eminent doctor, but she had nothing to do with social media. And I'm like, this is the kind of stuff that people, she didn't overthink anything else, right? She was just like, I want to get there, I want to put out my story.
Yeah.
And I think I would look for people who are nervous about this or worried about that's what I would. There are enough, it's not like there are no doctors who are sharing Instagram content, right? But
Yeah.
she just goes back to like what it is that defined her life and her professional experience.
Yeah, I mean that's very rare. Like when I see people being authentic, and they're coming onto the camera and they share their stories, and it goes like 20K is like huge because I know how much I struggle for, because there is also this reservation of putting your authentic self out there, for a, like, obviously the validations that we need, whatever we are doing, is it right or not, whatever we are speaking, are people gonna like it? So things like that. I like, for example, I also think about, we don't want to offend anyone with my story or with anything that I'm doing. So I feel, I definitely want to follow her, like the kind of story that you said. It's really inspiring to see such females, putting themselves out there without getting like any hesitation and just killing it.
Yeah, I know. Her handle is Geeta Arjun, so please do check her out. It's just totally lovely. Yeah.
Great. So coming on to the budget that founders need to have for, then when they are thinking about storytelling or brand building or putting their brand out there on social media. So what is the sort of budget that these founders can have?
Uh, Budget is a function of money you have and what you want to achieve. You can have like no budget, and I mean, actually, there's no budget is not possible. You can have a low budget, but also it is definitely relative to what are your goals going to be. For example, if you're okay to kind of have like a slow paced organic growth, then you don't need like a lot of money. But if
Yeah.
you're really looking to grow very fast, and also like what kind of, if you're looking at hyper growth, what are you trying to achieve, do you have the money, all of those kind of things. I think the thing is that if you're so different, so I want to talk about this at two stages. So I think if you're starting out, then you definitely need the money to have like at least one person whose job is wholly to tell the story and make the brand grow. Whether that is a Whether that's someone you hire in the organization, is it your comms person, is it an agency? But you definitely need the money, because the founder cannot be the person who is accountable on a daily basis to help the
Right.
brand and tell the story. So I think you need the money for that. Uh, I mean, like I said, it could be an agency, it could be like a person that you hire. In today's sort of digital world, I think it's definitely possible, to do a lot of things here. But you need the money. Again, this is at the starting out stage. Um,
Yeah.
there are great tools. You need to have the money to leverage those tools. So, like just like your
Right.
basic, like a pro Canva account, having like a paid chat GPT account, being able to run some Google ads. I think this is like a very basic level of requirement now, um, because also the tools are great, right? Like this was not possible earlier. Earlier, like you had to spend money, like you had to invest a lot more to get like really good design. But this is where technology has disrupted this. So I think it is
Yeah.
possible, but below this, less than this, having a budget less than this, and then wanting a lot more, then I think there's a gap in what is your understanding and your expectation. The next phase, I think, is that it's basically when you're past that initial thing and you're actually counting on your storytelling, um, to maybe get you like sales leads. You want to kind of build like a maybe a look, maybe, and usually this is the case for like D2C businesses or B2C businesses, because people are, if they're selling directly to a consumer, then you need, then there's a whole other sort of marketing budget. But I think that phase, again, it depends on a couple of things, but it really depends on, like, what is your goal? Are you looking for brand building, or are you looking for actually generating leads? And that is like a whole spectrum of spend. I would say the formula there is to actually work back from, what are the outcomes you're looking for. Is it, like I said, is it like just more brand building, so you're looking for visibility, you want better search, in which case you would be spending on things like SEO, you would be spending on things like ads, content, all of that. However, if you're looking to generate sales leads, then you're actually, spending on different platforms. You'll need to spend on, of course, all of this is assuming that there are people that you're hiring, but also you'll
Right.
need to spend on other kinds of platforms, right? Like a HubSpot or your Zoho, or things like that. And that's how
Yeah.
you kind of work out your budget. But I think definitely think of it again when you're making a business plan. This needs to be in the budget at that stage itself.
Understood. And just to clarify, so there are different type of companies, be it any industry, D2C or B2B or G2C also. Um, how they can approach when they are starting, the priority for until and unless it's like I've seen with a lot of cosmetics and all these skincare brands that they definitely do brand building even before trying to sell, because people will only buy once they trust you. But for a lot of other industries, it's like they want to do lead gen, right, to survive. They are not really high on we want to build a brand or anything. But so what can be the approach for the second category on how they can do in like lead gen very quickly? Do they like, is there any process that like the step-wise process that they need to be thinking about this first and then go to this part of marketing and then try like think about any paid marketing? So is there any structure like that for them?
Yeah. Again, I mean, without a specific example, I think it's a more of a generalization. But first of all, I think I want to say, if you're saying lead gen quickly doesn't happen. Lead gen, depending on the industry you're in, of course, if it's, like you said, like it's a makeup brand, it's a much more faster sort of, because it's an impulse decision and people are buying online and things like that. But if it's more, like back end B2B, it's going to take time. So I think
Yeah.
quick and lead gen doesn't happen. However, I believe that the thing is, you first need to have like a very strong organic storytelling and brand set, and then you start putting money into it, because
Hmm.
you need to fix that. So, to give you an example, we worked with an organization that works. So they're a traditional business. They make, they're in the manufacturing space, but they make this equipment that basically helps to clean like water, oil spills. They clean lakes. They were doing a big project in Srinagar with where they were cleaning up the Dal Lake. Um, so you would think how and most of their sort of contacts and connections happen through very back channels, right? Through government officials, through maybe like sometimes you go to like expos and things like that.
Yeah.
But we did work with them to sort of set up their brand and their storytelling because um, they realized, and when we were working on them, that one is of course they have different audiences, so what you need to talk to different audiences also matters, right? And again,
Yeah.
it comes back to the same thing that I think like their team was very inward focused and they were really focused on kind of getting what their jobs are, but they did need someone to kind of think big picture for them. So in their case, for example, there was a great angle here, which was that actually something like this is good for the environment,
Yeah.
because they're actually cleaning up lakes. So their storytelling used to be more sort of manufacturing equipment focused. But what we worked on for several months was actually to make it a bit more solution focused in the sense that this is actually something that's good for the climate, right? It's good
Yeah.
for the environment. The fact that they were doing these cleanups, and also like there was a lot of there were all of these features, there were all of like these details around the things that they were doing that they were not able to put together before. So I think that's
Yeah.
something which was a great, which was an interesting example of how something that was it's a tradition, it's a, it's an old business, it's been around for decades, but how could that old business be adapted to what is it that people are now at the moment currently is trending is climate, right? Not in a bad way, but how could you bring that old that traditional business into a more current narrative, and that was something that was that worked very well for them because then it was actually they were able to kind of also it gave more they were able to kind of connect to people at a more human level because this is something that people like you and I think about,
Yeah.
that our water is dirty, that our air is dirty, and but how does this connect to something that there is actually this company that is making equipment that helps to clean water?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I understand what is the approach that founders can go like. I feel a lot of founders are stuck when you said the manufacturing unit. They were really focusing on the manufacturing unit. That's what I see a lot of founders doing. They try to focus on what we have built, right? What we have built, and not on how it has impacted others or how other people are getting affected by this or how what they are thinking about it more from that angle makes a lot of sense. So for a founder, if they want to check if so, I also know a lot of founders who have read a lot of storytelling book and they're trying to figure out what can be the best story for their and one of the suggestions I would definitely ask you is what are the books that you would suggest people that just reading couple of books they'll be able to get better at storytelling.
I am a big reader, but I have to confess that I actually don't read a lot of books on like storytelling and business and founder and all of those kind of things. I've read some. Um, so I think I would say Google. There are a lot of brand and storytelling books. You can, if you Google them, you'll find plenty like Story Brand, Art of Storytelling, all of that. However, the two I my go-to. There are two. They're actually not founder business books, but they are books about writing.
Yeah.
And in fact, they're by fiction writers, but these are non-fiction books. Stephen King has a book called On Writing, and famously Haruki Murakami, who's a Japanese writer who actually writes in Japanese, but his books are translated into English. He has a very famous book called What I Talk About When I Talk About Running. They're very different kinds of books, but for me, the takeaways from these was that they both talked about writing, but and if you kind of extrapolate that to storytelling, but the themes are around sort of discipline, perseverance, and goals. It's not about like hacks, right? Like if you do this you'll be sorted, but it's actually writing is like that, running is like that, running a business is like that, storytelling is like that, that you
Yeah.
really need to, if you have clear goals and you have a lot of discipline around it and you persevere with it, the outcomes, you will get the outcomes you want. So I think so those would be my suggestions. Also, they're just like extremely well written books. So really, just that is enjoyable itself.
And what would be your, because your favorite storytelling in the industry? I see a lot of brands coming up with brilliant stories. Which ones are your current favorite?
So my current favorite is actually this is, I have to say I am biased because I like to like look at homegrown brands, Indian brands that are and I definitely always I do have a soft spot for women-owned brands. So my current favorite is Heads Up for Tails. I am a customer of theirs as well. They are a brand that does pet products. So my confession is that also I am a customer and I love their stuff, but I really like their the content they've been putting out because it's a mix. So it is very purpose for storytelling. It's a woman founder and who talks about and the brand also talks about the fact that why do they do this is that they really want to give pets like dogs, cats, and other kinds of animals a good life, right? So
Yeah.
it's not it's and that's what it's about. And I like the storytelling because it's like there's a lot of real life stories. So there's a lot of like very cute cats and dogs and other kinds of animals and stuff. But they also do like stuff that is trending. So they will pick up. They did this really funny thing around the time the Met Gala, which is this big event that happens in New York, which is a fashion event. So it has
Yeah.
nothing to do with animals. But and if you went onto Instagram for those few days, like everybody, it was all about the Met Gala, and you're like, what is this relevance to us? But they did like a really funny set where they had this dog sort of commenting on all of the costumes and things like that, which was like it's trending, but it was also very cute and real to their brand. So yeah, so I like Heads Up for Tails. I very diligently sort of follow everything that they do.
Yeah, yeah. I think I've also seen their pages and when they were pitching and I think raising, that's when I got across their story. But very beautifully and very cutely put. I think that's what people actually want to see in a brand, right? Where they find it interesting to follow. There are things that they're learning and there are things that they want to do, even if they don't have a dog. Like if I don't have a dog, I'll still follow them for the
Yeah.
sake of it, right? I know how good they are. So understood. So, any final thoughts that you want to share with founders who are trying to do their storytelling and brand building, breaking their heads into it?
Yeah, well, since you said breaking is, don't break your head. The job has been done by people before, which is why I talk about the story arcs. That go to the basics and just follow the basics because this is not your job. Your job is not to crack storytelling. Your job is actually to crack your business. But the storytelling enables you to do that and will help you do that better. So don't worry too much about like what is the right way, what works, what doesn't work. All of that information is available out there and you can find it. And hopefully, I've shared some of that as well. So, that is not what you should be sort of stressed or worried about. What I think you need to focus on is see, your story matters. Every founder's story matters. And people are really interested in what other people have to say. We live in a time of it's this weird time of like hyper connection, digital connection, but hyper isolation as well, right? Because everything is a lot of it is online, so people are really looking for very deep connections and community, and that is we're always interested in people, so people's stories do matter, and you as a founder are at the very much at the forefront of that. So I guess this is my point that speak your truth. Your story definitely does matter, and people really want to hear it, and that's what you should be focusing on.
Thank you so much. I mean, I really learned a lot of things in this, and I'm also one of those people who keep reading about storytelling and how you can do better. Because whatever you are building, whatever we are doing, storytelling is everywhere. I feel like everywhere in the personal life also. A lot of places we need storytelling. Convincing our parents for marriage, we need storytelling. We need some effective storytelling everywhere. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. We absolutely tell stories every day in our lives. I think I mean, India especially has a very rich tradition of that, right? Like, and I talked about the Mahabharata, but also like we grew up in families that had like it was actually like that, Nanaji, Naniji, Dadiji, all of those kind of stories. And I think actually it comes very naturally to us, because we are actually used to talking to a lot of people. We are used to like dealing with multi generations. We're very comfortable with older people and younger kids. I think we just kind of get a bit. We're just very intimidated by digital, visual, all of those kind of things. But I think if we really went back to like some of our roots in this, we all have it in us. And I think it's just a question of practice and maybe some training, and sometimes just maybe not overthinking it too much and just going with the flow.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And this is for all the founders who are building. I hope this was helpful for you if you're trying to, make your story more effective, affect, get more people to see your brand with your storytelling. And if you're struggling, then Aditi is the one I know the best. Like she has been a very powerful person around that I really follow with their work, what you are doing and with storytelling today. So thank you so much, Aditi, for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I love what you're doing with this podcast, and I think you're a great example of some of the things I talked about, which is that you're just you're so thoughtful about it, and you're really introspecting, and you're doing this so consistently. And I'm really really grateful to sort of be a part of this. So thank you so much for having me, Usha.
Great. We'll connect again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.